My name is Bruce Johnson. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am a part of the Splunk delivery team here at TekStream, and specifically I run the security department, which includes a variety of different consulting services, managed security services, managed services, as well as MDR services, which is what we're here to talk about this afternoon. We're borrowing the tagline from Pink Floyd, one of my old favorites, is your MDR comfortably numb, because that really does sum up the landscape of MDR providers, particularly on a Splunk platform these days. And we'll talk a little bit about it today in terms of what our solution is and how it compares to what you might be familiar with. So we're going to talk a little bit about the MDR landscape. We're going to talk a few ways of how you might identify a comfortably numb situation for your current MDR provider. We'll apply the MDR lens that we bring to bear and talk a little bit about our solution as well as some of the customers that are leveraging it, and then we'll wrap perhaps with some of the differentiators that we bring to bear. This is kind of the obligatory marketing slide that sums up the fact that we have more threats and it's harder to retain people and we are losing sleep. I think it doesn't really require marketing statistics for us to know this relatively viscerally. We all know that keeping us safe is a moving target, and a lot of what we focus on is making sure that we're providing an adaptive platform for incident response that effectively deals with those moving targets with that area of change. A lot of what we focus on, obviously, is the Splunk platform. And this is an overview, if you will, of what the platform provides. We have ancillary technologies that we layer in, but we like to focus on the core of the solution being a SIEM and SOAR platform, as well as all the kind of technologies that hang off of that Splunk provides. Many MDR providers use Splunk as a data platform, really just ubergrep, using it as a database for all intents and purposes, and layer on proprietary solutions on top of that, which ignores all of the layers that Splunk has invested in to be a best-of-breed SIEM and SOAR platform. So we try to leverage, because our pedigree is consulting, we try to leverage the best that Splunk has to offer and augment it where there are gaps. What is kind of the high level from a product solution perspective that is provided from Splunk is fundamentally the data platform. Still one of the best big data platforms on the market. The ability to ask any question over any time frame and get a real-time result is unparalleled. Layering in analytics and machine learning, intelligence management, or automation, orchestration, and threat research, all of those layers on top of that fundamental platform are equally differentiated. So that's really why Splunk is where it is in the marketplace for SIEM and SOAR. Those products really lay out this way from an actual SKU perspective. Starting in the middle, obviously, is the data platform. On top of that is the enterprise security platform, which allows for search, alerting, pivoting, risk analysis, identity and asset, a number of different modules that have been improved over time in that context. Threat intelligence management is layered on top of that with a product called TrueStar that has been folded in basically into the enterprise security environment on Splunk Cloud. It allows for threat normalization across various feeds. And then, of course, the SOAR platform on the top is the automation platform for incident response, and then threat research from Surge is layered in as a service on top of that as well. We have a relatively simple measure for MDR effectiveness, and we boil it down to really three different measures that are simple to evaluate: visibility, fidelity, and automation. We call it a VFA model. Visibility is the measure of the threat surface area, what it is you have visibility to. So that might include various data sources within your organization. In some cases, there are data sources that we know we'd love to leverage that are pretty high volume or harder to get to. We obviously want, as security professionals, to have as much visibility as we can and as much context as we can when we're assessing a threat. It also pertains to additional threat lists, additional use cases, any of the expansion, if you will, of the platform. Fidelity has to do with false positives. We know that measure intimately, across all of our threat solutions, and we're constantly attempting to tune our alerts, to remove false positives. But that's an easy measure to evaluate as well. What is the percentage of events that translate into real security threats? And that, that's what we're tuning constantly. Automation then is how much do we actually have to touch an incident in order to remediate it. And so getting those measures is relatively straightforward. Unfortunately, they're always expanding and they're always increasing. So if you're an 8 out of 10 today and you maintain an 8 out of 10 status next year, you're doing quite well, because the amount of threats and the amount of threat surfaces you're expanding to include the amount of visibility is going to, commensurately impact fidelity and automation. So we constantly look at these things in our security assessments, and we're constantly looking to improve them on a quarterly basis on a strategic level. And expert guidance, the final measure of how we apply improvements in each of these categories. So that's what we're bringing to bear, to make sure we're making improvements. Our solution, is taking what is chaos and putting it through a lens, applying a few kind of basic building blocks, if you will, that have to do with making it effective, making sure it's collaborative, with automated response, ensuring an aggressive time to protection, leveraging 100% domestic TekStream employees as a solution, and leveraging our expertise in Splunk, and really taking those measures, those wavelengths in this case, and tackling them each in turn, improving on each of those measures constantly and consistently. So before, borrowing another euphemism or another tagline from Pink Floyd, no one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. Before, obviously, if these characteristics describe your current environment, then you might be a really good candidate for a TekStream MDR solution. If you're still bouncing around multiple applications is a key one. When you adopt a SIEM platform, one of the fundamental value propositions for a SIEM is avoiding swivel chair security, meaning it obviates the need when you have a perceived threat to have to go to the firewall, to have to go to the EDR solution, to have to look at 5 different screens in order to figure out how real is that threat and where has it impacted me. That's the fundamental value proposition of a SIEM, right? And not if you're still using a SIEM and still having to go to each of those source systems to remediate or to understand the context, then perhaps it's not tuned in such a way that it's effective. Simplistic alert echoing is another characteristic, meaning if you've got a SIEM that gets an alert from your EDR provider and it just really echoes back to you that same alert 4 hours later without any enrichment or context for what that particular threat at an endpoint might be doing in the rest of your enterprise, it's a simplistic alert echo that really doesn't provide as much value as a SIEM can. Not being able to bring in adapt to new appliances, new sources. The innovations that you're applying every day with new security appliances ought to be folding into your SIEM environment and SOAR environment. So inaccurate or partial data sources. So visibility is one of those things, as I said before, that is constantly evolving, and we're constantly expanding it. And the same is true, of course, of fidelity. We're never going to get rid of all false positives, and nor maybe should we. There are some we just want for context. But the goal is always to lessen them, right? Is to only ring the klaxon when it's something that we really need to respond to, and that's the goal for all of us. Automation obviously is lessening my time to response, but it's also giving me a framework so that I can structure my incident response so that it is repeatable. And in the context of our solutions, it actually makes it easier for our SAs to grow, meaning they come on board and they learn in a very structured incident response framework, in a SOAR framework, how to respond to a threat in what we would consider the best practice from a workbook or a runbook perspective. It helps to guide them. It also focuses them on what's really suspicious as opposed to what's obviously benign or malign. And then from our perspective, the ability to leverage TekStream and grow your team from what is a very, very small team of core security professionals and expand that to a 15-person team, let's say, leveraging Splunk resources really kind of gives you leverage. It also gives us the ability to provide value on an incremental basis across multiple customers. So in terms of how we apply the visibility measure, obviously we are constantly looking at risk analysis to say what are the use cases we need to be worried about, what are the responses and the processes, how do we refine them, what are the new threat lists, how do we add more context to an alert for users. Let's say if in an EDR perspective, if we have an individual that has been infected, where else was that user in the ecosystem? Where were they in the cloud? What were they doing in LDAP? So our ability to enrich alerts in the context of visibility is critical. And then for us, the adoption of some of the more advanced security concepts like zero risk or proactive search to augment these types of solutions is critical. Fidelity, obviously, we're looking at risk-based alerting. We're looking at reducing noise through more effective algorithms. We're looking at more sophisticated risk scoring. So if you've implemented Splunk SIEM, you know that out of the box there's rather simplistic identification risk scoring. There are much more sophisticated methods to identify risk for individuals or identities within your organization, including how many times have they failed the know before test, how many times has their machine become infected, are they actually falling for every phishing email that comes across their desk. So those are the types of things that we look at when we want to improve fidelity. Automation obviously is highly collaborative, and in many of our customers we start with our library, our template, if you will, of both searches on the SIEM side, but all of our automation playbooks, which is kind of consistent with anyone that has a SOAR component within their MDR. But we find that very quickly we start branching out to even operational types of playbooks, and these are highly collaborative playbooks where we're looking at how do we onboard a firewall request, or how do we manage a user lifecycle through offboarding, those types of things that are security related but maybe more operational in nature. And then obviously we like to think we're the best of the best in terms of Splunk consulting. We started as Splunk consultants 6 or 7 years ago, and all of us had to be core certified because we were Splunk consultants. We wore the badge. We came across with a Splunk t-shirt, had the Splunk email. So we have an extremely experienced cadre of Splunk consultants as the core of our solution, and we've just simply expanded that to bring it to bear in MDR. But having that consulting background gives us really a different mindset in terms of how we approach these problems, in that they're very collaborative, in that they come with very seasoned Splunk professionals that have seen it, been there, done that, solved the problem many, many times. And we're also up to speed on what are the latest innovations in the Splunk context, meaning we can't afford to be long in the tooth. We can't have customers knowing more about the latest release than we do. So we have to be abreast of the latest innovations. The expert guidance that we bring to bear from a Splunk perspective is really a big differentiator in the marketplace for us, one of many. But it's important because we see when we take over solutions, migrate solutions from other MDR providers, inappropriate configuration of a Splunk environment. If you're not getting data in accurately, you're not making accurate decisions. So that's a lot of what we bring to bear in terms of our expert guidance. Our solution is really Splunk as a whole, as an organization, really owns the Splunk problem. That is to say, the opportunity to own Splunk from soup to nuts. We provide software. We can bundle software. We can pull that in as a part of the deal. We obviously provide consulting services. We provide solutions on top of those services, and we also do sourcing. So if you want to build your own expertise in Splunk, we can provide that as well. So whatever kind of issue that you're having with Splunk, we can solve it. We even outsource some of the internal processes for Splunk, like the on-demand services. We do a significant portion of that with TekStream consultants. So from a services perspective, drilling down on that, obviously SIEM, SOAR, implementation, remediation, I'll talk a little bit more about that. cloud migrations. We were the first partner to do Splunk cloud migrations, and we have some automated tools in that context to make it easier. We're obviously an elite Splunk professional services provider, one of 5, I believe. And we have a variety of solutions that we built up over the years. Obviously, I'm here to talk about MDR, but we have managed services as well, where we're hosting environments for some very well-known customers, including managing their AWS environment, and patch and vulnerability management, Splunk application support for kind of retainer-based services, and then from a sourcing perspective, finding individuals. Along the bottom are basically a few logos. There are many more. But those are, our cloud practice and our Splunk practice are probably the most quickly growing. And that's our NASCAR side. Been in business for about 11 years, and mostly domestic U.S. Some of those are pretty well-known companies, but you can see that it represents a very wide range of company size, if you will, and a variety of very different problems for small customers versus very, very large customers. From a services perspective, we provide a remediation service, as I mentioned before. This is really for stale SIEM environments that haven't had a lot of care and feeding. So many Splunk enterprise security customers that we deal with had a 3 to 4 week implementation and haven't really been touched since, or weren't really appropriately transitioned, let's say, for customers to own themselves and modify themselves. There are an awful lot of knobs in a Splunk implementation. We know where all of them are hidden, and we can really make your Splunk. We've done this for a number of customers that are using ES, make it effective. And it's once the epiphany happens, once you've turned on things like risk-based alerting and done that appropriately, because there are challenges in risk-based alerting as well. Once you've done that appropriately and you've turned that over, you are fundamentally solving the swivel chair security problem and doing it effectively with high fidelity. We also then remediate the SOAR playbooks, relatively rigorous methodology, if you will, for playbook development in a kind of a factory approach, and a variety of different kind of sub-process templates for repeatable processes that we bring with our templates for scoring and SLA metrics and all the rest of that stuff. So, SIEM and SOAR remediation from a service perspective for all of you that are using Splunk from a security context is an immediately valuable service. In terms of our MDR solution, it is 24/7. It is domestic only. Splunk badged employees. We use a very kind of, as I said, a collaborative approach because we are kind of fundamentally consultants. We're looking at managing the SIEM SOAR vulnerability and augmenting it with a variety of different tools, whether it's vulnerability tools or EDR tools, et cetera. We apply a variety of different services in that context. So GRC services for governance, risk, and compliance, ISO services for information security officer types of services, vulnerability management, so we manage your Nessus Tenable environment as a part of the solution. So all of those, as well as EDR solutions and ancillary technologies that are applicable in the MDR context, we support as well. This, obviously, our discussion today is more focused on the Splunk side of our MDR solution. We also then do dial tone, that is to say, managed services for a variety of customers that take the administration and architecture challenges with Splunk for those people that are doing on-premises Splunk or Splunk in their own cloud environment. We manage those for them. Our solutions also include a collaborative SOC enablement package. This is for customers that want to really build their own SOC capability in kind of a shared services model. So we help to establish the SOC environment for them, just like we would any other SOC, but in this case, the security analyst portion of the solution is a shared responsibility, meaning the customer can bring their own security analysts and handle shift work and collaborate with us in terms of incident response. This is kind of for many of our customers that go for this solution actually have multi-tenant SOC environments of their own, meaning they're providing a SOC solution to multiple agencies or institutions, and we're collaboratively providing that service with TekStream security analysts. In many cases, we'll do the off hours, so we'll do the shift work that is not as desirable, the night times, the weekends, and vacation and holidays, whereas the customer might handle shifts during the day. So when we talk about collaborative SOC, it's not simply the technique that we use to implement the SOC, it's really a co-managed solution with our customer acting as a partner and having a stake and ownership in the solution. It still includes a dedicated SOAR platform and a shared Splunk cloud stack, if you will, for the SIEM portion. When we start talking about really multi-tenant SOCs, it's a dedicated SOAR environment that is designed for multi-tenant implementation and with full access to our customers that need to manage a shared service, if you will, for multiple agencies. This is typically in a SLED context. So our MDR solution, as I mentioned before, is more focused on the enterprise side with SIEM and SOAR. And the technologies really that are layered on top of what is already a variety of different security tiers and appliances that you've got typically as a foundation within your security. So ours is an enterprise-focused solution that layers on top of your firewalls and LDAP and SSO and networking, et cetera. Our process is, that is not a binary choice. It's very typical to have both of those. So we are leveraging typically your case management platform, ServiceNow or Jira typically, to create cases in parallel to the incident response. So if we're receiving a response, for instance, from your firewall and we're blocking an IP or a URL, we might also create a case that goes to your networking team that says this should not have gotten through. Let's take a look at those firewall rules. This is kind of the architecture that we rely upon for our MDR solution. Here we have basically the SIEM environment, which can be in Splunk Cloud or in your own environment, but it is what's layering in enterprise security. And obviously we have feeds from the customer source environments, firewall, EDR, and cloud, going up through agents, Splunk terms them forwarders, into the enterprise security environment. And we're picking up from that enterprise security environment and feeding it into a hosted AWS SOAR environment of our own, using the best security and technology techniques or security techniques in an AWS implementation. WAFs obviously are filtering for IP ranges and they're filtering for DDoS attacks. It's one external LB without really an IP is the only ingress point. And obviously firewalls on individual boxes in between. And then there is obviously one kind of interaction from our environment into an automation broker in the customer environment to interact with the endpoints. Our process is really divided into those things that are up to the second that feed the processes that are longer running, let's say with more advanced investigations. So in the gray area is what we're doing from an operational perspective for incident response. The royal blue, if you will, is what we're doing on a daily, weekly basis with more in-depth investigations, as well as our weekly status meetings where we're reviewing how well we're doing relative to the SLAs that we're tracking, as well as how effective our searches are being. We also then look at all of the enhancement requests that are in our Jira environment that we're tracking on a real-time basis with you providing the priority to those enhancements. And then we're getting together on a more monthly or quarterly basis to look at our baseline security assessment and look at those BFA metrics to make sure we're improving on all of those scores. We obviously, would have all of those ancillary like GRC or ISO services in support of the core incident response service that include things like GRC, ISO, vulnerability management, compliance, et cetera. So all of those are kind of supporting process to our core incident response. A few case studies. This restaurant services chain was probably our first customer 11 years ago. It's worth noting that our renewal rate is 98%. It's a number that we are very proud of, because when we form a relationship with a customer, because we are highly collaborative, we're an extension of their team. And we are constantly making sure that we're being effective with that lens. Is our customer successful with the solution that we're supporting? And in this case, this particular restaurant chain has been with us, as I said, for 11 years. They keep coming back. We keep expanding our responsibility. This is also the pilot, if you will, the first place that we implemented ES remediation. So, this was a typical solution where, and there are many of these customers that have not given enough attention to their enterprise security environment. So, again, applying those metrics, BFA metrics, to make improvements, very concrete improvements on each of those lines, means that this customer was able to effectively adopt RBA, and they were able to, tune the fidelity of their alerts, as well as interact with the SOAR environment on a much more methodical basis. So a lot of improvements. This is now making Splunk a core of their security solution, and I think they have a very small group, a very small cadre of security professionals, which very effectively leverage partners to build out their MDR environment. Mainline health systems, this was an MDR transition or replacement. You can see kind of on the right-hand side some of the misconfigurations that we were able to remediate. This was a solution where there were a number of provider deficiencies that really led to recommendations that were not given a lot of credence. And a lot of that was because garbage in, garbage out, right? There was not a lot of expertise applied to the data that was coming in being appropriately formatted. And this was one of those scenarios where a proprietary solution was layered on top of the Splunk environment, and it was opaque to the customer. So there wasn't a lot of collaboration, not a lot of transparency, and not a lot of accuracy in terms of how they'd use the Splunk environment. And so if you're not using the appropriate Splunk expertise, and you're not leveraging the best that Splunk has to offer in terms of SIEM and SOAR, then you're really dependent upon someone else, and in some cases providing a redundant solution to what you've already paid for from Splunk. LSU, this was an example of a multi-university, multi-tenant SOC along the lines of our collaborative SOC solution. This is the idea in this context is they wanted an ability to provide a top-tier, best-of-breed MDR solution to smaller schools that perhaps couldn't buy in at the price point necessary to adopt that kind of advanced solution. So with a volume purchase, with an ability to provide SOC as a service out to those schools in a collaborative, co-managed SOC environment with TekStream, they've been able to use students really to defray some of the overall cost and provide them with a platform to learn security in the context. So this is one of those scenarios where SOAR is really, really helpful in terms of bringing people into an environment where they can remediate threats and do incident response in a structured workflow. Vulcan Materials Company, again, another solution coming to us from another MDR provider, and taking advantage of our Splunk expertise once again to build out this appropriately for them in a very customized manner. Again, the ROI and metrics that we were able to achieve there, very aggressively implementing our solution, is I'd say one of the major successes there. I guess if we were to sum up the strengths for TekStream, we would point to the fact that we're a top-tier elite provider. We've won multiple awards over the years in terms of the top services provider as well as a top cloud services partner. Our model doesn't necessarily depend directly on the ingestion of volume. Our model is really how many events and how many threats are we remediating, how many incidents are we actually getting involved with. So the ingestion rate that you have with Splunk is not directly tied to MDR pricing, nor really ever should it be. Our our expertise bringing to bear with core certified consultants and kind of what we do under the covers in collaboration with Splunk is a lot of the reason that we can differentiate this in the marketplace, using a non-proprietary, best-of-breed solution that takes advantage of all that Splunk has to offer. Our process is relatively straightforward. We do platform implementation is formulaic to a certain extent for us. We do it, day in and day out in terms of implementing Splunk solutions, our MDR platform. We have what makes us a little bit different is kind of the 90-day shakeout where we are learning how to be an effective extension of your team. What are the processes that we need to understand in an MDR context in order to be an effective member of your team? Meaning, who are the people that you're normally getting invoices from? Who's always being attacked? Who should be on the blacklist? And those types of things allow us really in the first 90 days to shake out all the false positives, to make sure we're being effective. And then we take a break point with that first security assessment and revisit all the assumptions that we made up front, really to establish our baseline going forward. And then we're off to the races with MDR. I think that concludes really all that we were here to talk about today. Obviously, if you have any questions, please contact us at the number listed here or visit our website, and we'd be happy to follow up. Thank you so much for your attention this afternoon. We'll hopefully talk to you soon.